Hi, it's Katrina! From the cold case of a Medici mercenary to a mythical place that turned out to be real, here are 10 of the most mysterious archaeological discoveries. Number 10. Biblical Mystery. The Philistines are arguably one of the most mysterious groups of people mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. The most famous stories are perhaps that of David and the Philistine giant Goliath, as well as Samson and the Philistine Delilah. For many years, historians and archaeologists have been trying to figure out who the Philistines were and where did they come from. In 2016, archaeologists finally discovered the first known Philistine cemetery. It was located in Israel outside the walls of Ashkelon, an ancient Philistine city that lasted from the 12th to the 7th centuries BC. Containing more than 211 burials, National Geographic reported that the graves are giving archaeologists an opportunity to investigate the origins of the Philistines and their assimilation into local culture. Before this, their remains were so rare that archaeologists started to joke that maybe they were all buried at sea. That's why they couldn't find any. Until this landmark discovery was made, researchers had little to go on in terms of understanding the Philistines' burial practices and roots. The Bible paints the civilization out as a villainous, uncircumcised group that continuously warred with their Israelite neighbors. Artifacts reveal that the Philistines were much different from other local cultures of the time. They consumed pork and adhered to Aegean and Greek customs rather than Semitic practices. DNA analysis now shows that they actually descended from a group of seafaring Europeans, perhaps from Iberia or Greece, that arrived to Israel 3,000 years ago. Their pottery, architecture, and burial customs were quite different from everyone else. Their people were buried with very few grave goods. Some had a couple of pieces of pottery and very rarely pieces of jewelry. This one was found with some artifact on its face, which could have been some sort of eyepiece or something that was placed there after death. Some believe the Philistines were among the so-called Sea Peoples, a tribal confederation that terrorized the Mediterranean during the late Bronze Age. But the mysteries of their identity and their homeland endure, with researchers hoping that the recently discovered burial sheds some light on their many unanswered questions. Number 9. Strange Cemetery. During a routine excavation in the Leith Port area of Edinburgh, Scotland, archaeologists got quite the shock when they found a medieval cemetery filled with the remains of hundreds of people. It was just a normal day in anticipation of a planned public transportation line in 2008, but it turned into a much bigger dig. There are no known records of anyone being buried at the site since the street it sits along was built in 1790. Consequently, the transportation project came to a screeching halt while experts dug deeper. They unearthed over 380 burials altogether, with the oldest dating as far back as the 14th century. The newest graves date back to the time of the cemetery's closure, around 1650. Since then, plans for the tram extension were reinstated and excavations resumed. Another 359 skeletons were found after COVID-19 restrictions were lifted last year, bringing the total number of bodies discovered at the site to over 750. The graveyard constitutes one of the largest burials from its time period ever found in Scotland, as well as the largest collection of skeletons in Edinburgh. The next step is for researchers to analyze the skeletons in hopes of learning more about who the deceased individuals were and what their lives were like. One separate, isolated grave found beneath the other graves, who appears to be a female, was found in a pit measuring 33 feet across and 10 to 13 feet deep. She was buried in a crouching position and facing in a different direction than the traditional Christian burials. Why? No clue. The grave likely predates the rest of the cemetery's burials, and it seems to have nothing in common with any medieval features at the site or nearby. But experts are unsure how old the burial is or the circumstances of the woman's life or death. They hope to learn more through radiocarbon dating and isotopic analysis. Number 8. Medici Mystery. Born in 1498 as Ludovico de' Medici, Giovanni dalle Bandenere was a Medici warrior who was exiled from Florence at just 12 years old for committing a murder. He went on to establish a fierce reputation for his violent spirit, which made him a skilled 16th century mercenary and military captain. The Medici popes Leo X and Clement VII hired him to fight for them, and he became quite famous during his day, believed to be practically invincible. However, in 1526, a cannonball struck Giovanni, requiring the amputation of his right leg above the knee. He reportedly died shortly after surgery, possibly from gangrene. In 2013, the man's remains were exhumed from his burial at Medici chapels in Florence. His femur was intact, with only the lower leg and foot removed, telling a seemingly different story than what's on record. But what that story is, or might be, has yet to be determined. Describing Giovanni as a vigorous man, measuring about 5 feet 8 inches tall, investigation leader paleopathologist Gino Fornaciari explained that the man's bones bore clear evidence of carrying heavy armor and riding horses dating back to his teenage years. Fornaciari added that experts hope to clarify the nature of Giovanni's wounds and what type of surgery he had. Number 7. Tel Kadesh Hoard. Sometime during the late 2nd century BC, or 2600 years ago, someone buried a collection of personal belongings at the archaeological site of Tel Kadesh, along the modern-day Israel-Lebanon border. The items include a terracotta figurine of the god Eros, better known as Cupid, as well as 23 glass game pieces, a pair of metal writing instruments, and a hairpin made from bone. These objects all showed skilled craftsmanship, and their personal nature captured archaeologists' attention. They were mostly in good condition, indicating that they had been deliberately buried together. Game pieces from the ancient world are very unique. Archaeologist Erlich sought to understand how and why the artifacts ended up buried together. He points out that while it was customary to find a few ancient game pieces here and there, it was highly unusual to come across 23 of them at once. Erlich explained that the only imaginable scenario where it would make sense would be with the burial of a child or adolescent, where game pieces may have been given as funerary offerings. Archaeologist Adi found a poem about a young woman named Hippa, who buried some items as part of a pre-wedding ritual. The poem's author, known only as Antipater, had a rather common name for the time, but there are records of a poet by this name who lived near where the Tel Kadesh hoard was discovered, suggesting that whoever buried the objects might have done so for the same reasons that Hippa did. Perhaps it was some sort of tradition before marriage. Get married and the games are over. It's highly unlikely that experts will ever know for sure why someone buried the hoard of trinkets, but this seems the most likely. Number 6. Moche Ruins. In 2018, archaeologists announced the discovery of many ruins and artifacts that the cryptic Moche culture left behind. Found at the Huaca Limón de Ucupe site in northern Peru's Lambayeque region, it dates back some 1,500 years. The ruins consist of 5 raised pyramid-like adobe structures and 2 chambers, one which was used for meetings and the other that was used as a banquet hall. The hall is decorated with large murals measuring as high as 32 feet, featuring sea lions, fish, and other marine creatures. There are 2 thrones that face one another, one which a ruler would have sat on, while the other, lower seat, would have been used for making offerings. The building was clearly intended for ceremonial gatherings among Moche nobility, according to Chief Archaeologist Walter Alba, who spoke with National Geographic. Its discovery constitutes the first physical evidence of these events actually happening, whereas before, they were only seen in the culture's artwork. For unknown reasons, the structure was ultimately partially disassembled, concealed, and then abandoned. The Moche civilization's collapse around 700 AD is also a mystery. Some experts believe that El Niño brought severe flooding from the nearby river and that the extreme weather played a role in the society's collapse. But what really happened remains a mystery. And now for a little-known culture that you've probably never heard of. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Nayem Abid and Erica Russell. You guys are awesome, and thanks so much for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Origins Explained family. Number 5. The Promontory Culture. During the 1930s, a young anthropologist was exploring the north shore of Utah's Great Salt Lake when he found some curious artifacts in some caves. He carefully cataloged hundreds of moccasins, moccasin parts, bison bone, pottery, arrows, stone tools, and all kinds of things, and then sent them to the University of Utah. Then came the Great Depression as well as World War II, so the mysterious moccasin sat forgotten. But now, archaeologists are on the trail of this little-known ancient culture, now known as the Promontory Culture, after the caves the artifacts were found in. Archaeologists have gone back to the caves to better understand who lived here. The staggering amount of moccasins is extremely rare, since most of these types of items disintegrate over time. The style of these shoes was just like those from the Canadian subarctic, so finding them in caves in Utah is a little out of place. They were unlike the moccasins of nearby groups and closely resembled those worn by the Dene people, who lived much further north. This suggests that the Promontory Caves inhabitants were Dene ancestors, according to geochemical archaeologist Dr. Jessica Metcalf. The team studied over 200 pieces of footwear from the caves, with 82% of the shoes worn by children 12 and under. Researchers examined chemical traces in the shoes to reconstruct the movement of the people who wore them. An isotope analysis of an ankle strap revealed that the people who had lived in the caves had subarctic Dene roots, and that they traveled pretty far south of the Great Salt Lake, perhaps into the American Southwest, where Dene-speaking populations still exist today. The conclusion so far is that it appears as though Dene connections go back much further than scientists originally thought, with long-distance migrations starting many centuries ago. Number 4. The city of Ur. Famously mentioned in the Bible as the place where Abraham fled to from Canaan, the ancient Sumerian city-state of Ur was thought to be a mythical place. But once again, it turned out to be real. In fact, it flourished as a prosperous trade center even before it was mentioned in scripture. Founded around 3800 BC in what is now Iraq, the powerful Persian Gulf port city was home to as many as 80,000 residents at its peak. Ur was continuously inhabited until around 450 BC, when changing temperatures and drought prompted the population to abandon the site and migrate northward toward more fertile territory. An Italian explorer rediscovered Ur in 1625 when he traveled through the area and found bricks and other artifacts bearing strange inscriptions. At the time, the city's ruins were buried beneath the sand. British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley excavated the site in 1922 and found that what's left of Ur is largely reduced to rubble. I mean, it was around a really long time ago. The city's most visible surviving remnant is a partially restored ziggurat that was unearthed during the 1930s. Originally constructed during the 21st century BC, the structure was rebuilt by Babylon's final king, Nabonidus, during the 6th century BC. Over the centuries, the coastline has changed, and Ur's few surviving remnants sit much further inland compared to the city's location during its heyday, when it was situated near the coast and the mouth of the Euphrates River. The ruins are helping archaeologists gain a better understanding of the culture, but their knowledge is admittedly limited to what's available at the site, and the once powerful city of Ur remains an enigma. Number 3. Neolithic stone balls. Hundreds of carved stone balls dating as far back as 5,000 years have been found throughout Scotland and other parts of Europe. Their appearance varies, with some featuring intricate patterns and others bearing carved knobs, pyramids, and other designs. Most of the balls are similar in size, measuring roughly 2.75 inches in diameter. Experts haven't been able to figure out these Neolithic artifacts, but they're determined to try. The National Museum of Scotland recently announced that its researchers are trying to get to the bottom of the mystery through virtual technology by poring through hundreds of documents relating to discoveries of the stone balls, and by searching for missing and undiscovered artifacts. Unfortunately, experts have limited data to work with. For example, while they know that many of the stone balls were found near Aberdeen, they do not know the exact locations of the discoveries. Additionally, some people who found these objects in the past likely underestimated their historical value, meaning there are probably some stone balls in the possession of families whose original owners overlooked their worth. Dr. Hugo Anderson Weimark, who is heading the research, told the Herald that the team is trying to track down a few lost stone balls that are known to exist, including one that was last seen in 1986 and another that went missing in 1908. So if you see something, let us know. He says there are probably a few others that got lost because people didn't know what they were or that they were important. The most recently discovered stone ball was found among a collection of flint tools in 2018. Anderson and his team hope that more will surface as their investigation unfolds, and reminded the public that Scottish law requires people to report archaeological discoveries, even if it's just a ball. Number 2. James Ossuary. The James Ossuary is a limestone box made to hold bones that was made known to the public in 2002. Ossuaries were very common in Israel from around the 2nd century BC until the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. But this one was special because it features an Aramaic inscription stating James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. If the box's contents are what the carving claims, it means they represent the earliest known written mention of Jesus Christ and the first known archaeological evidence of him, period. For historians and Christians alike, the discovery would be of major significance. But ever since the report was released, the James ossuary has remained shrouded in controversy, including claims that the box itself is a genuine artifact, but that its inscription is a forgery. In the so-called forgery trial of the century, the ossuary's owner, Oded Golan, faced accusations that the carving was fake. 4 others were also accused of participating in the alleged scam. Golan and his co-defendants were acquitted in 2012, but not everyone is convinced of his innocence. In the years since, experts and critics have revisited arguments supporting and denying the ossuary's authenticity. It's hard to prove or disprove claims of forgery since the artifact's origins are only traceable to a certain point, when it was purchased from an antique dealer. The Israel Antiquities Authority has made its mind up and believes the ossuary is fake, but some scholars have pointed out that the entire IAA panel consisted of members who were openly outspoken against any arguments in the ossuary's favor. As with most biblical discoveries, this artifact has led to much heated debate. So the question remains, is it real? Is it not? Who knows? Number 1. Headless statues. While conducting a routine excavation ahead of a building project east of Athens, archaeologists recently discovered headless marble statues of a woman and her servant in an ancient Greek cemetery. Dating back to the 4th century BC, the statues depict the woman seated in an elaborate chair, with a female servant standing beside her. The sculpture likely marked the woman's burial sometime before 317 BC, when the Athenian governor Demetrios of Phaleron outlawed the lavish grave markers. Grave monuments like this were common at the time, and often featured people with their servants. In addition to not knowing who the women were, experts are unsure why their heads are missing. It's likely that the heads were accurate depictions of the people they represent, as it was customary in ancient Greece to mark graves with idealized faces. Excavations are ongoing, and the statue was transported to the Archaeological Museum of Vrana for safekeeping. Archaeologists are constantly finding more fragments and artifacts at the site, so we just have to wait and see what else they find. Thanks for watching! Which discovery was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up for more like these. See you next time! Bye!